People were like, how do you come up with content ideas? I'm like, I don't. I go on podcasts or I have people on my podcast. And then like I have a friend who does this work for me. I do pay her. I say friend, but I do pay her. And I spent 25 minutes with her on a call last month, and she gave me 30 different pieces of content from just our conversation. And she added captions, she added music to some, she added some memes to them, like all that. Her and her team, I should say, did this. It was 25 minutes of my time. And it was just me doing what I do, which is podcasting. And now I have a month of everything finished.
Welcome to the Clear Brand Academy podcast, where we take the mystery out of marketing and help you get more leads and sales with a clear brand and proven marketing tactics. I'm your host, Josh Ramsey, and today on the show we have Alex Sanfilippo. And Alex is the host of Podcasting Made Simple. It's an amazing podcast show itself. And he's also the founder of podpros.com, which is a software company specifically focused on creating solutions that serve independent podcast hosts and guests. Welcome to the show, Alex.
Josh and Clear Brand, thank you so much for having me. It's truly an honor to be here today. I've been listening to the show, so it's really cool to be on a show that I get the opportunity to listen to. So thank you.
Yeah, I mean the feeling is definitely mutual. I've been looking forward to this for a while. We use PodMatch. It is one of the platforms that we use to match up, as you might say, the language there, and it's fantastic, man. And so I'm super curious in this conversation to learn from a much more established podcaster, and also a founder, and also a tech guy, and also a data guy. So I think this conversation can go in all sorts of places. But maybe somewhere to start is how did you fall in love with podcasting?
Yeah, well, Josh, again, thank you for using it. First off, I appreciate using PodMatch, which is one of our services, and I'm sure we'll get into what that means specifically throughout the conversation here. But podcasting was not on my radar to fall in love with. Let's put it that. It was an accidental relationship that was formed. And it happened because I did 15 years in big corporate. So I worked in an aerospace company. And after hearing that, most people assume I was an astronaut, skydiver, or fighter pilot. I was none of those things. I focused at a company that did parts support. So we're actually manufacturing parts for aircraft that flew below the atmosphere. So it's as boring as it sounds, but I loved it. I was like an operations guy. I was a profit margin guy. Super fun. And over that 15-year period, I worked my way up to the executive level. It was a big publicly traded multi-billion-dollar organization. Really fun to be involved in. But one day, like a lot of people, like you kind of get the itch to become an entrepreneur. So I started side hustles. And Josh, here's the thing. After that long in corporate, like I think I started side hustling when I was at year 12 in the company. I had failed attempt after failed attempt after failed attempt. Like I just, being corporate, you kind of get this mindset and it's hard for you to get out of it. And so I struggled for a bit. And then I got the brilliant idea, which I can now say was like, I'm being facetious here, but I was like, you know what? I'm going to start a podcast and I'm going to talk to people who have successfully left a 9-to-5 job to start their own venture. So I want to talk to people who had done it successfully, what I was trying to do. For lack of a better term, Josh, was after free coaching, right? Like I didn't want to interview celebrities or anything like that. I'm just like, how the heck did you do it, right? And thus started my podcasting journey. And to wrap this story up, 2 things happened during that time. One, I learned how to become an entrepreneur. Like I learned the steps to take and do it successfully. But 2, I learned that I really loved podcasting. Like I love the industry. So I was like, man, I know what to do. And now I want to find a way to do it in podcasting because I just really have enjoyed this time. And that's what got me started in this whole podcasting thing.
Oh, man, well, I'm super glad that you did. I was one of the attendees at PodPros January, which was I was last week. And it was awesome, man. And, I think there's something to be said about the kind of character that gets attracted to podcasting as well. You get all sorts on all sorts of shows, but I've never met a podcast guest or host that I haven't kind of clicked with. And I think that clicking piece is super interesting. It's like this relationship, like you jump on and you're having this chat and you're building this relationship. And I think that has so many implications. Like, and I'm sure, I'm seeing your head nod for those of you that aren't watching on YouTube. Alex is nodding in agreement here. So I'm curious what you're nodding into with what I'm saying.
Yeah, it's the relationship. So the reason I fell in love with podcasting, again, coming from aerospace, which it wasn't just the company I was in, it was the industry as a whole, extremely cutthroat, extremely competitive. Even your friend sitting in the chair next to you if you're in sales was your friend until it came to a sale, right? So like just competitive as I'll get out. And when I got into podcasting, when I started, I immediately had the opportunity to meet other podcasters because I went to a podcasting event. And I was like, cool, I could learn. And it was actually shocking to me how people were like, oh, well, when you launch your show, let me know. I'll share it on my social media. Let me have you on my show so you can talk about the show that you're launching. Let's do this to help you out. Here's my tool. Here's free access instead of paying for it so I can help you out. I immediately realized what you're saying, Josh, which is an abundance mindset. And so from day one, I was like, holy cow, these people are so nice, right? Like, I want to be around these people. And also to the point of like never meeting a podcast guest or host you didn't like, I feel the same way. And here's the reason for that, I believe. Podcasting, if you haven't done it a million times, meaning an interview, is a meaningful experience. And the basis for all friendships is dependent upon a meaningful experience. So it's like if you have any friends that are local to you, it's like going hiking together, going whitewater rafting together, going to the beach together, right? Like there's something meaningful that has to happen. And for many of us that are entrepreneurs like myself, or people that just are trying to get a message out to the world, sharing a moment like this, even on a virtual stage, is a meaningful experience. So it's the basis for a future relationship to be built on. And for whatever reason, podcasting attracts people with abundance mindset. So you're having like this meaningful experience to build a relationship with somebody who's awesome. And I mean, I don't even know what else to say about it, but that's just something I'm super thankful for. It makes me really excited to be in this industry.
Yeah, man, it's been awesome to be a part of the community that you're building, and I think as well as this mission of giving voices, and I think, you know, as entrepreneurs out there listening and marketing directors listening, it's like we spend so much time trying to get this message and like, how do I get this thing that's going to get the message out there? And here's podcasting. It's like, get on a camera. Well, not even a camera, just turn on a mic and tell us about what you're doing. Tell us about why it's important. Tell us about the people's lives that you've changed and why you care about it. It's like the ideal, well, to me, I think it's like the ideal marketing. I mean, yeah, because it's not just about like these relationships, which are awesome, and I'm all for that. But it's like, at the end of the day, I run Clear Brand's podcast, and this is, you know, we're focused in on getting marketing results, getting leads and sales, and so I think the power of that relationship side, which I also think as a listener, I really love in podcasts as well. Like, I'm listening for that relationship, and I can see it in hosts that are just there to like beat the drum of what they're about, and I kind of don't have a question coming here. I'm just like gushing about podcasting and gushing about how it can help businesses as well.
Yeah, Josh, you did bring up a really important point that I want to touch on real quick, though. Like, the relationship that you and I formed through this is great. That's a bonus, though. At the end of the day, podcasting is about influencing the life of somebody who hears it. Or sparking an idea. Like, when I say influencing, I don't necessarily mean like it doesn't need to like change their life. Like they're heading one path and now they're going another, right? But it needs to somehow change their perspective, their thinking. There was a report done by Convince and Convert is the company, if anyone wants to look it up. And I don't know how many people they polled on it. I can't recall exactly, but I know it was in the thousands. They asked people why they listen to podcasts. And over 75% said that they listen to podcasts because they want to learn something new. Again, whether that's true education, they just want a new perspective, that could be all it is. An example of this, though, would be, again, I listened to your podcast. I listened to a recent episode you did with Marco Torres about incentive-based marketing. And I encourage anybody who's listening to this, go back and listen to that, because it'll do exactly what I'm talking about. It will spark your creative brain, make you think, how can I do something like this? Great episode, by the way. Did a really good job interviewing like a powerhouse speaker, right? So kudos to you, my friend. But anyway, the point being, man, it's ultimately about the listener and impacting them. And the hosts and guests I get along with the best are the ones that are showing up from a place of, I'm here to serve, to add value. If I make money out of it, great. But at the end of the day, if I can help change somebody's perspective or life, I'm all in. Those are the people that I get to hang out with. And like you said, we're just gushing about podcasting right now, but I think it's important that we share that proper perspective and mindset of the primary reason we do this. And then the other side being, of course, the benefit that it brings to our brands, our businesses, and us personally.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard you speak about other podcasts as well about kind of systems and systems thinking, and I know you've also got SOP, PodPros SOP, which is kind of these SOPs templates for podcasters to use. And the reason I bring that up is this systems perspective. Like, I'm listening to us talk about, I'm listening to you, I'm listening to myself talk about podcasting, and I'm thinking of the meta level of business, of being valuable, of speaking straight into the value, of sparking creativity, of connecting, like we're talking about connections here, and the marketing message kind of connecting to companies out there. And I totally agree with you that sparking creativity is and looking like, how do I apply, even as niched in as like Marco's episode is about travel incentives, that might not work for like, I don't know, someone that's listening that has a business that they're like, that could never work. But the idea, like, how can I incentivize? How can I draw people in with something memorable or something new? And I love that idea of like the meta level of what we're talking about. And I just find podcast interviews amazing for doing that. It's like a great conversation of just exploring.
Yeah, you brought up podcast SOP. I'm all about the organization because actually I'll give credit where it's due. Someone who was on my podcast, her name's Angela Kelly Smith. She goes by Kelly, but she brought this example when she was talking about why are we all creative in the shower? And she said it's because we have a set routine. You do not have to think about how you shower. For me, it's shampoo, then soap, right? And for other people, there's more to that routine. It's still the same order, so you don't think about it. So you get all these creative ideas because you're just moving on autopilot. And so the reason we even created Podcast SOP, which the SOP stands for Standard Operating Procedures, was to create a project management software so podcast hosts could not have to think about what step is next in their production process. When it comes to releasing an episode, we want it to be very simple, straightforward. They create it themselves. They create it one time, and every time they just press a button to add a new episode. So again, they can spark that creativity because at the end of the day, if you're really educating people, again, whether it's helping make their life better, whether it's actually teaching them something tangible, you want creativity in it because people learn through creativity. And I'm all about trying to expand that. So for me, I'm extremely organized with my show. I can tell you exactly where we're at for the next 13 weeks. I've got team members who handle every piece of it. So I can free up my time to engage with listeners, to make sure I'm thinking creatively for them about what they're going to want and need next. And I think that the podcasters who get that right tend to be the ones that go the furthest in podcasting, not just from like the show download numbers, right? They don't necessarily have the biggest listenership, but they'll still be in podcasting in a year, 2 years from now and adding a ton of value creatively to their listeners.
Yeah, I love all of that, man. The structure, giving us the creativity, like you said, the creativity to think into your listeners. I also think the timeline that you just mentioned there is super interesting. And maybe you're a listener right now and you're wondering, well, would podcasting work for me? If so, what do I do? What do I don't do? And I know, Alex, you brought out some great content on like top 5 things to remember, top 5 things not to do. So it could go in so many places. And I just recommend that you definitely go check out Alex's podcast, Podcasting Made Simple, because he's got specific episodes on various aspects of all the way from the tech to like what to do, what not to do, where to focus. But maybe the lead question here is like, who is podcasting for, given that we're in a conversation around business, around sales, around growth? Yeah, your thoughts there.
Well, first off, podcasting as a host isn't for everybody. And now before everyone listening like gasps, like, oh, how can he say that? He's a podcaster, right? I'm going to say this. It's a labor of love and it's a lot of work. Right now, Josh has a harder job than I do because when I'm done sharing what I already know, like I'm not having to expand my knowledge right now. I'm sharing what I know. Josh is the one who has to come up with good questions. But after this, there's a whole production process that goes into it. There's distribution goes into it. After this, I'm going to go for a walk with my wife because it's a beautiful day here in Jacksonville, Florida, right? Like that's what I'm going to do. So it's a labor of love from that side of the mic. And I'm not trying to discourage anyone from it because Josh would tell you for Clear Brand, I'm sure it does an amazing job helping bring leads, helping bring recognition, developing that know, like, and trust. That's one of the big powers of podcasting. It's doing all those things. But I say all this because if you're like, maybe my company, maybe my brand should be in podcasting, I encourage you or someone on your team to start by being a guest on a few podcasts. See if you like the medium. See if you think it's actually adding value in a way that you know you can share. Because what I find is a lot of people, they jump all into starting a podcast. And Josh, I've seen it so many times. People spend 9 months working on it in the background. 3 weeks into their actual launch, like, this is terrible. I hate this. It's too much work. It's stealing my focus. I'm out. Why not save your 9 months and just jump on a few shows, see if you actually like it, see if people receive it well, see what you hear from the host. And if you're like, you know what, this is good, this is a medium I want to really dive into and experience some mastery in, then go out and start a show. To me, that's step one, is really to figure that out. Once you do, if you decide, hey, I want a show, come up with all the basics before you get started. How often will you be releasing episodes? How long will the episodes be? What will their format be? How are you going to keep up with the production, right? Do you know who your guest should be? Do you know when you're going to launch? Do you know who you're going to serve? Like, find that narrow niche. And I'm being very broad there. As Josh said, we have a lot of content around that. We don't have the time to get into all those things, but these are questions that I just mentioned. Go back and rewind that. rewind, whatever you press back these days, however we do it, right? Showing my
Turn the
generation
tape
there.
back. Record, move the vinyl in the opposite direction.
Right, exactly. That's what I'm saying. I'm showing my age here, right? Anyway, just go back and listen to those points again, because all those are really important. Figure those things out. Come out with a true strategy. I'm not saying take 9 months to do. As a matter of fact, I think the sooner you can launch, the better, because right now, podcasts from a host perspective isn't growing. We're in month 31, I believe, of no growth in active podcasts from a hosting side, but listenership is like probably almost doubled in that same amount of time. So it is a really great opportunity to start a podcast. But again, don't take too long. Take advantage of the good time that we're in for podcasting right now.
Yeah, man, it's, and I've also been involved in some sales as well, and like you say as well, there's this kind of, you gotta love it. You gotta really show up and love it. People are listening to us talk right now. Imagine I was like, oh, Alex, okay, so what's next for podcasting? Like, because people want to listen to someone that's enthusiastic. And it's been such a wake up for me. I kind of feel like I'm going through this like very public development. Like as a host, as a person, you kind of play this out, and how you show up translates in every sales call and every meeting, because every podcast is this live interaction. It's recorded, but there has to be, and I'm just so glad that you started with that. Like, just try it, because it's a long game, and that's what you've been teaching me. I've been following your perspectives here, and maybe that's something to also, if you could speak into that. Like, realistically, what is this marriage? Like, both of us are married. You got to know the contract. You got to know what you're getting into. Like, what are people getting into when they start a show for their company? Because the CEO is like, hey, we need a podcast. Hey, you do the podcast. Like, what is the commitment that we're actually making here? And we should be ready to really make this a successful use of time to grow a business. Because as you say, it is consuming.
Josh, you said some extremely insightful things I got to backtrack on before I even answer that question. The first one is like, you are being vulnerable by being on a podcast. And I've listened for a while to your show, so I've heard your own development in it. And I think one of the first problems that people make is they jump into it and they want it to sound a certain way versus it be their true selves. Like, honestly, and you know this, I'm not trying to sell you short or anything like that, but if I go back to your first episode compared to the last one I just mentioned, the one with Marco, I can hear the difference in your ability to do this. We're all on a growth journey, and showing that transparently makes you a good host. Because again, being in podcasting develops know, like, and trust. But if you're lying, pretending to be someone you're not, that's not going to do very well for you. So I commend you, first off, for being willing to do that, to show your own growth. I think that's a great thing. And that, to me, is part of the commitment, is being willing to say, I'm going to be myself and show that growth. For lack of a better term, also, podcasting is not like dating. It's like a marriage. There should be a contract involved. A lot of podcasters, what they do, the ones that fail, and by the way, that failure rate is at 90%. So 90% of people stop podcasting before the end of their first year. And the amount of people that stop before 7 episodes or 2 episodes is even higher. So it's very rare that anyone makes it in podcasting. It's because we look at it as like a dating relationship. We're basically like, I'm going to try it and see how it goes. We'll go on a few dates. We'll check it out. Now, what I did, and the reason my show succeeded, is not because I'm somebody extraordinary, but I committed to 52 episodes. 1 episode getting released a week. So that's 1 year of content. And I went public with that. And I said, no matter what, to my people that I trust, right? My circle, I'm like, do not let me stop before this. I'm going on this journey. And by doing that, when I hit episode 30 and I was like, this sucks, I hate it, right? Like, it's so much freaking work. I made that public commitment of like, you know what? I said for good and for bad, for better or for worse, right? Like, I'm in on this thing until that contract. And thankfully, most marriages, I don't think have an end date on them, a contract, but maybe there'd be less divorce. I don't know. I digress. As a follower of Jesus, I believe in marriage, so I shouldn't even make jokes like that. But anyway, my point being, commit to something before you get started. And maybe it's not 52 episodes. Maybe you're saying, hey, we're going to commit to 1 season. Maybe that's 20 episodes, right? Whatever it is, make a commitment to yourself, to your team, go public with it. That way you can give a shot, and then commit to your own development along the way, as Josh has done. An example of this, of the opposite of this, I was on a podcast recently, and when I was in like the green room, which just means pre-recording, the host was like, so animated, like, woo, Alex, can't wait to record with you. This is going to be amazing. It's going to be so good. Like, I love the way you show up, man. Let's go ahead and get started. You ready? Hits record and like, hey, Alex, welcome to the podcast. How are you doing today? Totally changed personality. Now, when that sales call happens and they hear this person really animated, but they're thinking he's this really monotone person, there's a discrepancy. You break that know, like, and trust instantly. Again, podcasting is great for know, like, and trust if you truly are yourself. Let people see you as someone who's also growing and developing, because that is humanity and people want to see that. And that's how you develop that initially. Josh, I got to turn it back over to you because I just went on a crazy rant there. I'm sorry to talk so much.
Oh man, it's awesome, dude. I really like to hear and not just the stuff where you were complimenting me. Let me be clear about that. I mean, right, I appreciate the perspective.
Josh is a sucker for compliments. That's all he's looking for here.
You just keep going. No. So I think what I was really taken by in that last interaction was like every time you were saying. The podcast host, the person that is going to step in front of the mic and talk on this digital stage and show up and be authentic and be real. And there's not to use marketing jargon, but there's a brand scent. You smell the same throughout the whole kind of interaction. While you were speaking, I was kind of substituting in the business, the company, like the offer. Is the offer real? Is the offer authentic? Does it show up with the same voice? Is there a know, like, trust? And I think, you can really, and that's, maybe that's one of the reasons why podcasting is proving such a great way for brands to connect to their customers, because there is this sense of, well, this is the voice of a brand, or this is how they're showing up, and they're obviously not getting breathed down on by the C-suite or the exec, or just kind of control. Oh, you can't say that word, and you can't say that word. So I think that was really interesting. So I was just happy to be listening to you while you went on, and I could just kind of explore that idea. And you can comment on that as well. But what I'd also like to think about is like, how do we also justify our time? As business owner says, hey, you should podcast, and you're like, okay, it's a marriage, 12 months, and he's like, okay, hold on, that's like 5 hours a week. It's like, okay, doing the math. He's like, well, this is going to be an expensive endeavor. How do I know if it's working? And maybe that's the question I have. Like, how do we know if it's working?
To go back on something, you mentioned like where I said you, and then throwing brand in there. I love that. At the end of the day, and this. Humans connect with humans, not necessarily with brands, right? Like they want that human element and touch. An example of that is the restaurants I love to go back to here in Jacksonville, Florida, where I live, right? Like the local restaurants I love are the ones that the staff speaks so highly of. Like you get there and you can tell they are passionate to be there.
Oh, yeah.
And it's like, man, I want to go back there, right? Like you'll even forgive like the little things of like, I didn't get a good seat or it took too long. If the staff is all passionate, you're psyched. So at the end of the day, like the brand, yes, like push the brand, but the culture of the brand can be felt through the podcast host. No pressure, by the way, right? But if you're like excited about the brand and happy to be out there evangelizing it, man, that's going to get me excited as the listener. Be like, wow, I want to be in on that as well. But I listen to some branded podcasts where the host, clearly they might even be an external person who's just paid to be the host. They're not even inside the company, and that's okay if you can find the right one. But sometimes I even heard the internal staff, it's clearly just a 9 to 5. This is how they get paid, and they go home and do what they really like. You got to have somebody who's passionate, because they're the ones that are going to sell the brand. So when I hear brand, I'm like, oh yeah, that I can feel it. That person and that brand, those things are unified. There's passion involved. So for what that's worth, going on to like the amount of commitment, I love what you said there. Come up with a budget. Come up with how much time can be thrown into it. And the thing is, if you have a company where it's like, hey, we have a big budget for this, consider outsourcing everything except for the talent. So it'd be like, basically, I show up, I record with the guest, but someone's found the guest. I told them what I'm looking for. Someone's doing all the production. They're launching it. That way, literally, it's just a high-level person's time for 1 hour, maybe 2 hours if they want to do a little bit of research on the guest, right? There's those alternatives as well. But if you're like, no, we got to bring internal, we don't have the budget for it, that's fine. Think about what's most important. If you compare your year 1 to somebody else's year 20, you're making a mistake. You don't have to have all social media for it. As a matter of fact, keep just your brand's, your current existing brand social media. Don't build out a separate website for the podcast. Put it right on the actual website that you already have with the rest of your company, right? Make it a blog post that goes into it, anything like that. Keep it all together, even the name. What I find a lot of companies do is they immediately separate the two things. They should be together. And that will streamline some of the process. You don't have to do everything that you see everyone doing in podcasting. Thankfully, there's no right or wrong way to do it. But I find the more unified what you do is, including the podcast, including the social media, everything being on brand, which obviously Clear Brand is all about, the more you can do what Josh teaches, the better you're going to do as a podcaster. Let's put it that way.
Oh man, that's great. That's great. And it's this fun mashup of creative and scientific, and I think your case is just such an interesting one with the aerospace and like the precision. You know, again, I'm imagining precision. Like, there's wings that can fall off at the wrong angle. It's going to be a problem. And then bringing that into podcasting as well. Yeah, super interesting to see how the space is growing, how it can be used, and just how much content as well. How many different messages can be brought out. I loved you had on your show, I believe it was Mark Firth. I think it was Mark Firth.
Yep.
In PodPros. I've been checking him out and seeing what he does as well, and just all the ways in which you can repurpose this content and just really get that personalized message out to all these different types of customers you might have, and again, building relationships. Like, hey, I made you this video. Hey, there's this video that answers that question that you had on LinkedIn, or whatever your outreach is. It just becomes this catalog. It's like this weapons room, to not to use militant language. Maybe it's the aerospace that led in with this
right,
thought.
Yeah.
But it's like, you just got all these tools. It's like, okay, cool. You cold email. Well, hey, we are chatting about that with Alex, and here's a little clip. And of course, you wouldn't find any of it unless you have some kind of system, right?
Yeah, exactly. But I love I just taught this earlier today. People were like, how do you come up with content ideas? I'm like, I don't. I go on podcasts, or I have people on my podcast. And then, like, I have a friend who does this work for me. I do pay her. I say friend, but I do pay her. And she basically...
I like that. I like that culture. I like that culture of business.
Yeah. And I spent 25 minutes with her on a call last month, and she gave me 30 different pieces of content from just our conversation. And she added captions, she added music to some, she added some memes to them, like all that. Her and her team, I should say, did this. It was 25 minutes of my time. And it was just me doing what I do, which is podcasting. And now I have a month of everything finished. So at the same time, going back to something you talked about, like the cost of this, it might actually be cash flow positive if you're already spending all this time creating just specific content for social media, for email, all that. You can repurpose little bits of this and then call everyone to the action of listen to the full episode. And then hopefully in the full episode, there's a call to action to do business with you, which Josh, you obviously know that. There should be some sort of call to action to that. So you're working them through this content funnel that all comes from one cornerstone piece of content, which is your podcast.
Yeah, man. It's and again, it's this intention. It's okay. Well, there's an intention to show up authentically and to speak about things that are valuable for sure. But there's also this like very calculated side behind it as well, which I think is again, it's this great mirror of like the podcast experience, which is what we're in right now, and what you're listening to right now. It's off the cuff. It's just just riffing on the stuff that we love. But we wouldn't be able to do this if we hadn't built in these systems, applied these approaches. And again, I'm thinking of like the best businesses that make this creative process look so easy, but it's only there because they've put in so much of this graft to like build the structures around it.
At the end of the day, creativity just being such an important element of all form of content creation these days. And delivering your message, right? Whatever your brand is, like there's got to be some creativity involved. No one wants the static stuff anymore. People want to feel like they're part of something that feels innovative, feels trendy, feels human, and all that takes creativity. And the only way you can protect creativity in business, because everyone, they start day one, it's super creative, right? Yeah. But it becomes not creative when you just have more and more work to do. And that's what people call working on the business working in the business instead of on the business, right? The only way you can continue making that happen is to build systems around what you do. And yes, it was my corporate job, so I'm maybe dispositioned to think that way a little bit more. But the more I can keep my whole team just not having to think about those things, the tedious jobs you have to do all the time, it can just be more automated or more just in front of us. The more all of us can sit back and be like, I've got an idea. Let's try this. Because we have that room. We have the availability to do that instead of being like, we have 30 things we have to do right now. Go, 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 right? You turn into just a cog in the system, and we want to keep ourselves away from that as much as we can.
Yeah, it reminds me of a story I heard about Einstein. He was at some party, because apparently he did like to party. We can double check that, but I think he did like to party. That hairstyle was right fitting in for the party. And anyway, he was at a party, and somebody said to him, I think, let's spice it up. It was a girl that wanted to chat to him. It was before he's married. I don't know what to, get all these things right. But anyway, somebody wanted to reconnect with him after they had met him. And they said, what's your phone number? And he said, I don't know. And this person was like, what? You're this world famous scientist and you don't know your own number? Why don't you can't even remember your own number? And he says, why would I fill my head with something that's written in that book on the table over there? And it's again, like you're saying, it's this idea of just freeing up any resource, human capital, financial, anything that you can, so that it's available when that moment arrives. This idea is arriving, and it's in the moment, and it's real. And I think that leads to something quite interesting as well, is like the speed of the moment. The market is changing, businesses are changing, and podcasting is this live wire, right? It's these two wires, and you get to sit in there. I get to talk to you. You learned stuff about podcasting today, and you're on the cutting edge of podcasting tech, and I can chat to you today, and this podcast is going to go out in a week, 2 weeks. We stay pretty current. And that like, when is that delay of like the market compared to what is needed? I'm stumbling in my words, but you're nodding again, for those that are not on YouTube. So tell me what you're nodding at as well.
Yeah, it's an interesting medium because right now, here's an example. I always say it's about podcasting. When people who have been in it for 1 year, I'm like, oh man, podcasting's like dog years. Every 1 year is 7. And I really believe that because of how fast technology changes, how much we all are always learning in the space, right? And like, so I'm a big proponent of setting aside time for education. I want to continue learning it so that I can continue teaching it to people around me. And a lot of that just happens through the practice of doing it. Yeah. Thankfully, it's just becoming easier and easier. Like, podcasting isn't getting more difficult. Yeah. And again, like with no growth happening in the industry, even getting listenership is getting easier. Across the board, that's just happening. But I think it's important to leave room for education, for keeping things as evergreen as you can, though, because a lot of what we shared today, we're not talking about one specific tool. We're not talking about how we're using Riverside to record and how they just recently moved this button over here and they changed the countdown from 8 seconds to 5. Like, we're not talking about those things because in 2 years from now, people are like, what the heck is Riverside? Are they even, is that a company? Right? Instead, we're talking about the fundamentals of like, these things will always be the case. Yeah. And to me, the people that are doing really well in podcasting are the ones that are keeping it as evergreen as possible without making it not feel human, right? Like, we don't want to not mention that it's 2023 when we're recording this, right? Like, you don't want to be like, hey.
Dang it, Alex.
So, Josh is like, oh, it's either 2023.
Like one instruction, Alex.
Don't say the year. But what I think sometimes you don't need to do unless it like is hyper relational as a podcast. You don't want to mention Christmas necessarily being next week, right? Or like, yeah, hey, we're gonna like, here's what we're gonna go on break for 2 weeks. Like, mention that later on, like outside of it through social media and stuff, because if someone listens to it in 2 years, right, you want it to still feel relevant to them. Now, of course, you can have some branded content, but I think that the really great shows seem to get that right in a tasteful way, where it's just not making you feel like you're being left out because you didn't hear it in real time. It's still valuable at a later date and a later time.
Yeah. So for those of you listening in 2048, we're just so glad that you're into podcasting by now. And I think that's a cool segue as well. I mean, it's so funny how, yeah, when you loosen the grip and you have some kind of idea in the back of your head, like I was lining up in the back of my head to ask you, like, where do you see it going, right? But I wasn't like, well, I got to point you there, I got to take you there, and here we are. Like, it's 2048. What's podcasting doing? What are your thoughts about like where this is going? I mean, you've given us a good kind of lay of the land with the statistics of the opportunity that's available right now. What do you see on the horizon coming in?
Yeah, we'll talk about the horizon, not 2048, because when we are recording, it's a little earlier than that. If I make any predictions about 2048, they're going to be wrong. Let's put it that way. So.
Yeah. Well, that's it. That tells us a lot about where it's going as well. I mean, that's quite a long way out. 26 years, 25 years. Yeah, that's
anyway, a little bit of time. But hey, over the horizon, I have ideas for the next 5 years. Let's put it that way.
Cool. Let's hear it.
The first thing I've been seeing is, first off, to bring you, like, let me go through the past of podcasting real quick. So when it started in 2004, I think. Back then, I mean, there actually was rewinding. Like, I think he had to have his physical tape and stuff like that, right? Like, the times have changed. But back then, any podcast would do well because there wasn't a lot of options. And people were just interested in consuming this new medium. So, like, if you had a podcast called the random podcast about everything, it might actually have done well. Now, fast forward to today, the random podcast about everything will get no one who ever listens to it. Your mom might listen to it, maybe your cousin, right? That's it. It's just not going to work. You have to have, excuse me, Josh, for lack of a better term here, a clear brand with what you're doing. Like, it's absolutely required now to have that. And we're getting ready to jump into what I call like the era of the niche in podcasting. Here's what I mean by that. The podcasts that are doing really well that we're seeing right now, just starting to come on the rise, are the super narrow specific podcast. So for me, I live in a beach town. So let's just use the ocean as an example. A podcast called The Beach for Everyone is probably not going to do well because I just defined like, or like, hey, I can get even a little bit more specific. People who like sunbathing that are between the ages of 25 and 35. Probably just described about 1 billion people legitimately, right? Like that's still not really narrow. But if I said, and this was the name of my podcast even, I said a podcast for people who love to surf but are also full-time entrepreneurs that are really busy. Like that right there, that's a narrow niche. Now I'm talking about people who like to surf, but they're really busy starting a company of their own. Like now I found something. I can speak to those people really clearly. And the reason we're finding that's doing really well is through the power of AI and search and things like that, the podcast player apps. So I'll mention the two big ones, like being Spotify and Apple. And everyone's kind of just a couple steps behind them all the time. The searches in these things are getting really, really smart. And they're starting to actually pull transcriptions of them so they can pull out keywords.
Oh, wow.
And AI they're using is actually figuring out what it's about. If you have a podcast specifically about hobbyist surfers that are also entrepreneurs that are really busy, and that's what your episodes are about. That's the title of your show, your description, your episodes are about that. When people start searching that, that is going to get really easy to find. And because listenership is growing, people are going to be able to see that, discover it, listen to it into the foreseeable future. And as that gets better and listenership will continue to grow because we're busy people, we don't have time to watch YouTube 24/7 or watch TV 24/7, right? People are going to be able to consume that content. One more thing I'll share in that, Josh, is also that we're finding that the average rate of listenership is dropping. So this data is available if you have a podcast on Spotify, Apple specifically, or even Amazon now. You can see when your listeners drop off. And we're finding the average consumption rate for people listening to podcasts is consistently shrinking. Now, 5 years ago, having a 55, 60-minute podcast episode was fine. Now, if you're going to do one that long, it better be really good and really engaging. There can't be the BS of like, tell me about your childhood. Tell me about what you want to do. Did you go to college? What's your friend's name? Right? Like you can't do that anymore. It's got to be really specific if you're going to keep it that long. But in general, I think the future, we'll see people who want quick interviews. They're between 25 and 30 minutes and maybe even a little bit less than that are hyper-focused on one topic because people, again, going by that earlier stat that I gave you, 75% of people want to learn and apply something new. So that's really where I see this thing heading. That's the direction I see us going in.
Well, you know, I should have opened with that question because now we're going to edit 7 minutes off this episode.
No. Like I said, this is a good, engaging conversation. If you would have started off saying, Alex, where'd you go to school? Do you have a favorite pet? What's your favorite color? That's this, like, for lack of a better term, that's the crap that no one cares about, right? It's like, oh my gosh, get to what this episode's about. Because what people are looking for is you, Josh, the host, to deliver on the title that you made the episode. If you said, like, just for lack of example, how to know where podcasting is going. If we're talking about where I went to college and what my favorite color is and what kind of dog I have, that does not answer the question, the promise that you made to people. But our whole conversation has been very focused. This is one that will be, I hope, heavily engaged with.
Yeah, I know. I hope so too, man. Well, geez, it's been an awesome conversation. Really, really, really great. I really recommend that everyone goes and checks out. Hold on, before I even point them there, the one piece we didn't discuss here, and I got it as well because I'm a techie as well myself. You got like all sorts of things going on, man. It's almost like you figured out a pie chart of everything in podcasting and you were like, cool, URL for there. You get a URL. It's PodMatch, it's PodPros, it's PodLottery, it's PodTalks FM. I mean, just tell me tell me a little bit about your thinking into this digital landscape and why you've kind of spread yourself in the way that you have. I'm curious about each one of them. Maybe we don't have time to unpack, but wouldn't be doing justice if I didn't give you that space. I'm super curious.
Yeah, sure. No, I appreciate it, Josh. Thank you. First off, we did mention PodMatch early on, so I'll give that definition of that one because that's our flagship product. That's the first thing we launched with. And so PodMatch, for lack of a better term, it's like a dating app, but for podcast guests and hosts to meet. So it'll automatically match you, a guest, with a host on the topic you're looking for. So using my surfing example, if I'm that hobbyist surfer and I'm talking about how I've made time every day to surf and it's a surfing podcast, it'll say, hey, you two should have a conversation. You can chat within the software. You can even schedule. You never have to exchange an email if you don't want to. It handles all the administrative stuff, like I said. So that's PodMatch. That was our first one. How I came up with that idea to drive back and how I come up with all my ideas are what I said earlier. When I realized how to become an entrepreneur, Josh, what I learned, I can wrap it up real quick. I learned to find an area of passion, to get into the community that you're passionate about, find the problem that they're struggling with, and then offer a solution to that problem. For me, first, that was PodMatch because I was in the podcasting spaces where I was passionate, right? And then from there, I just started talking to my existing members. I stopped actually even going to the market. I just talked to my internal people. Hey, what else are you struggling with? The next thing was keeping their show organized. So we created Podcast SOP, project management software for them. And then the next thing was Pod Lottery because they wanted to get more Apple reviews on their show, which is a very coveted, difficult thing to get. So we built that out as well. And then I wanted to focus more on the education. So we launched podtalks.fm, right? Like all these little pieces are very natural fits. And people are like, wow, how do you do so much? The truth is not a single one of them has, aside from maybe the quarterly event, aside from that one, nothing has caused my time to be more in demand because they all flow so naturally together. As a matter of fact, it takes up less time. Because now when someone's like, Alex, how do I keep my podcast organized? I have the educational material and I also have the software solution for it. So now it's not this huge educational piece I need to provide anymore. It's just, hey, here it is. Someone talked about it at our last quarterly event and here's the actual software. So for me, it's just about finding the natural problem that the people I care about are struggling with and offering that solution. And I will be real, at this point, I think I'm done creating software. Like I'm just going to kind of ride it here. We're going to improve on what we have. I'm all about launching as early and quickly as you can to serve somebody. And then at that point, focusing on continuous improvement. We are now in the continuous improvement phase. But Josh, to answer your question, that's how we're doing it all. We're just solving problems for the people that we care about. And ultimately, we're excited about it because those people are releasing podcast episodes that are serving the world and making it a better place.
Man, there's so much in there, man. So much in there, not only just the technical side, but I just really love that idea of serving people that we care about. You know, as companies these days, there's this. There was another episode that I did recently with Kevin Palmieri, and we were talking about the culture of care that companies really need to care, and you can't care about someone you don't know anything about. So I love what you're talking about you didn't even have to go to the market anymore. You were plugged into your own customers, people that you were trying to serve, and asking them what they needed. So I think that's amazing. I'm super excited about following the trajectory of PodMatch. We are PodMatch enthusiasts. I am a PodMatch enthusiast myself. I've drunk the Kool-Aid and it's great. I'm a customer first before a kind of host reaching out here. And I tried a couple. I did try a couple, and I just think that you've managed to really balance this, almost what we started this conversation with, like the structure and system so that you can get the reach and get the numbers that you need to feel confident that you can show up and do the creative side as well. Because you still have that personal connection, not only to the guest or the host that you're connecting to, but you also have the numbers that it's like you can choose that focus. You can this is actually not quite a match, and it's not a big swipe left, big tears and drama moment. It's just like, you chose not to pass, and people are cool about it. They're like, cool, next time, I'll catch you later. Yeah, so it's awesome to see what you're doing. I'm really curious about where you're going. Where can people go to find out more about you, to get in podcasting? Where do we point the people?
Sure. Yeah, I'm a big proponent of only sharing one call to action, but I want to say thank you again for talking about PodMatch. And if anyone is specifically interested in that one, this is not going to be my primary call to action. I'm sorry to have two, but if that's hey, that's what I want, the best deal you will ever get on PodMatch is if you go to joinpodmatch.com/clearbrand. Josh is... I set that up with them. You're good to go. Join podmatch.com/clearbrand if that's what you're specifically interested in. If you're just interested in podcasting in general, go to podpros.com/win. Whether you're interested in being a podcast guest, host, or you are a podcast guest or host, I share 5 quick wins that you can read in less than 5 minutes that'll help you continue to level up and become a better host or guest. So podpros.com/win. But at the end of the day, Josh, I recommend people hanging here with you and ClearBrand. You all are doing some amazing work, and it's truly been an honor to be here today. So thank you for having me.
Awesome, man. Well, thank you so much for being on the show, and we look forward to watching the horizon to see where you're leading us in this game of podcasting. It's been a pleasure.
It's an honor, man. Thank you again.
Thanks for listening to the Clear Brand Academy podcast, where we take the mystery out of marketing and help you get more leads and sales with a clear brand and proven marketing tactics. If you liked this podcast, please leave a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts. If you'd like to outsource your marketing to our team, go to clearbrand.com.